right, welcome back. This is Daybreak. We're live from Nairobi. Our conversation today is all around corruption, even as we get ready to mark the Africa Day when it comes to the Africa Anti-Corruption Day, rather, which is marked every 11th of July. And this year's theme is towards a common African position on asset recovery. So as much as we're talking about corruption, we have a specific attention on asset recovery. So Muthoni, let's pick it up from there. Once you've recovered these assets, the hard cash, it goes back into the system. How do we make sure that then it's not stolen again?
Thank you, Susie. Under the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act, there is the law that provides for how assets are managed and what happens to the assets when they're recovered. There is the Criminal Asset Fund, which is set up under the POCAMLA, Section 109. And that fund, we are in the process of drafting the regulations, or we have drafted, they are not yet complete, regulations as to how that fund will be managed. It's under the Asset Recovery Agency, administered under the Asset Recovery Agency, but the funds, of course, are forfeited to the state. Right. What we are anticipating is how we are going to agree on the projects which they'll be put into and how they're going to be implemented. We also have a procedure for UK, Jersey, and Switzerland. The MOU that was signed between the three countries and Kenya, which is called the Framework for the Return of Assets from Crime and Corruption in Kenya, domiciled in the UK or Switzerland or Jersey. That framework envisages a committee comprising of our government and the governments, the three governments, which will then agree, will then decide on the projects that will be undertaken under those funds which are returned or repatriated from those countries.
So without these policy guidelines, how is it operating now? Because you said it's still something you're working on.
Right now, what we have, for us, we have an account which we have opened in the KCB with the authority of the National Treasury. We have just received, only a few cases are completed, like the one of the wife of the KRA officer, the 20 million that was fitted. We're in the process of trying to dispose of the youth fund apartment. But of course, we have to follow the public procurement regulations and all that. And we put that into that account. It's a deposit account for criminal asset fund for now, before the fund is operationalized. But it's open. It is not, there are no withdrawals. It's just deposits. Nobody's handling it.
So for now, the money is just there until all these guidelines are done.
Yes, it's very safe.
Okay. All right. Sam, you've made a lot of recommendations, and I'm still on that, because one of the recommendations you made was executive to prioritize national ethics and anti-corruption policy to guide intervention measures, all arms of government to apply Chapter 6 to the latter. Whether that is happening or not is something else. But I'm particularly interested in enhancing the e-procurement to function at all stages. That is, how do you think that is going to bridge this graft, or the word graft?
Well, we consider technology as a vital tool in the fight against corruption.
But the operators can still just corrupt
it can be corrupted, because I mean, what comes out of an IT system is what the human interface puts in. But that said, technology offers a number of advantages. One of them being that even when the system is manipulated, it leaves a trail that you can follow. There's an electronic footprint that investigators can follow through to catch the culprits. But it also allows for the possibility of members of the public and other public officials who are interested, who do not necessarily have a mandate on that procurement, but are interested in building an integrity system to see what is happening within the system. I think there are practices in this that have been deployed. For example, in Rwanda, there is a new procurement system. I know in Ukraine, there is a very robust IT-based public participatory platform for procurement and disposal of public assets. That's very much acclaimed. It puts everything into the open and makes every transaction, every step very open to the public to see what is happening in there. I think juxtapose that with with our IFMIS system, which in my view, one of the criticism I have against IFMIS is that it actually took away manual processes that were fairly open into a dark room where the public doesn't see what is happening, except the people who are doing what they are doing. And I think that is the reason why we've run into problems with the abuse of this system.
And Samuel, since now you've roped in technology, now that we're discussing solutions, you've roped in technology, would you recommend then a system such as blockchain, which is an open ledger, it's transparent, it's being used from real estate, etc. Is that something you'd recommend other governments to take up?
Yes, I don't understand blockchains very well, but I do like the fact that everything that happens leaves a footprint that one can follow through, and that is open for everybody to be able to see. So it is certainly something I would recommend. Certainly, I think in the land management system, it is something to be considered. Yeah, so this for me would be a recommendation we would reiterate still. And then the question of Chapter 6 is one that I feel sad about, because in 2010 we were very clear what we meant to achieve with Chapter 6, but we've watered that down so significantly that right now it looks like it doesn't matter anymore. And it's not a surprise. I mean, I have looked at, for example, the question of vetting leaders, and I've looked at the vetting of candidates who are offering them for elections. And from then you could see who are going to be their clients after the elections. And it's coming to pass. It's not rocket science. You can see it. So where are you allowing people who have, questions of integrity hanging over their head into public office where they preside over public resources? I think it's negligent. But I think the politics of the day have been such that, we've allowed everybody to be on the ballot. We cannot continue like this and hope to win the fight against corruption.
So Judith, open contracts then. Is that a solution? Why are we not seeing governments, especially our very own Kenyan government, making certain contracts available to the public, be it a deal with China, with Uganda, with South Sudan? Why are we not seeing open contracts?
Sansi, that's a very dicey or interesting question, but you see government, the way it operates, some of them are confidential. Others are open. For their own good reasons. Others are security, especially for the country. So some can be made public, but there are those that we must also appreciate that as government, for it to operate as government, need to be confidential. But I just wanted to add to what my senior Muthoni was talking about, the checks and balances and how we make sure that the assets that we recover do not go back and they are stolen again. Well, it's two-faced, like she said. There's a local aspect of it, and ours is a bit different, because for us, we recover on behalf of institutions. And the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act requires that if you recover land, the title, after we have recovered, must come out in the name of the Principal Secretary Treasury, but in trust of the Kenyan people. You see, we must appreciate that for you to alter that kind of a document, we have a fallback to go and ask the person that we handed over that title to, what happened to this asset? We gave it back to you, and what happened to it? Because there's a center where we can go back after we conduct our review afterwards and say, where are these assets? In respect to the money, we also have a KCB account, the asset recovery account, of course with the mandate of Treasury. Whatever we collect annually is reported, but eventually it goes back to Treasury. In terms of what is repatriated from abroad, just like Muthoni has explained, we have the FRAC, that is the MOUs that are signed. What Kenyans need to understand is, and not all that money will come back. There's what we call the expenses that they have used to recover that money. We must give it to them because the agreement is they remove their expenses and they give us whatever has remained. It is so transparent because the committee is so wide and involves so many government agencies. We look at the agenda, national agenda. Which project requires injecting of more money? So instead of touching the money from the consolidated fund, this is the money that is injected into these projects. Yes.
And from the litigation perspective, and I know you're with the EACC, one of the biggest issues that people always bring up is when you're mentioning corruption, step aside. How hard is it to bring that up? Because are we victims of our own circumstances? Because our own law says you're innocent until proven guilty, but most of the time people are always calling for someone to step aside. How hard is that legally?
It's not hard. I don't think it is hard. What we should appreciate is that we have the appointments, people who are appointed and those who are elected. The regimes are different.
So the appointing authority needs to take action?
Not necessarily. When you look at our Section 62 of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, it will more apply to the appointed. But to the elected, the Constitution now falls back again because there is a criteria on how you remove an elected person. So maybe we need to look at our laws in terms of the elected, but for the appointed, they actually do step aside.
Okay.
Yes, so it is not so hard.
Caroline, what do you make of this situation? Because one of the things, it doesn't really happen. We keep saying that all the time, but it doesn't just happen.
Number one, I think because of our political situation. There's a tweet, I think it was a tweet or a text that talked about our political situation and the fact that, you know, we have the Muthoni syndrome. And every time someone is mentioned in corruption, it then becomes like a whole global, locally global issue, if I may use those words. But I think we've really just weakened Chapter 6 and not learned what our aspirations, as we voted in that constitution, it was informed by a past that demanded that we must demand more, required that we demand more of our leadership. And it's interesting that she's talked about the appointive positions, but even when it comes to elective positions, the whole process of vetting, like some says, you get people into office who are already tarnished and expect otherwise. But even we as citizens, we play a role and therefore must take the blame in that, because you can't put into office people who already have corruption allegations against them and expect different results when they get into the office. Okay. And then two, on the issue of this, the recovered assets, the income, maybe what would help is, would it then be helpful to have like a participatory, I like the fact that you're saying in the other countries it's a participatory process of identifying where those money, the money goes, but locally would it then make more sense that instead of the same opaque process of identifying the projects, then that this then needs to have a level of participation and transparency out there in where the money should be assigned? Because I think what Zinzi was asking, you get the money and you decide to buy ambulances, probably for, or whatever, whatever it is, you give an example of ambulances, but that money might have been allocated in another budget line. So how do you make sure that there's no duplication of assets or of budgeting? I like the fact that you have said that, you know, there's no withdrawal. And so hopefully when the regulations come, those participatory processes would then be part of what is put in, because it's part of our national values. But I think going back to Trevor, to your question, we must demand more of our leadership than we are currently allowing ourselves to. You can't, whether it's technology or the people, what you put in is what you get out. Okay.
Shamal, as we wind up, what more needs to be done in your view? I know you've been dealing with this issue so many times. What are your recommendations? How do we slay the corruption dragon?
One, I think, is culture change. Culture change in the sense that I think Kenyans need just to look within themselves. You talked about bribes. In as much as I agree and disagree with Mr. Kimeu here, you as a Kenyan giving that bribe, what goes through your mind? I think we also create opportunities to actually grow corruption. We've gone to a situation where sometimes when you bring in the suspects and they tell you, but aliniuliza, aliniambia manataka kitu kidogo. You actually create the environment for corruption to grow. So I think we need to look inside ourselves, evaluate our systems as the Kenyans, go back again as we've been told about Chapter 6 as the electorate, look at the kind of leaders again that we put in office, because it goes to the very root of the people who come into office to handle your public finances.
Okay. Culture change, upon chapter 6.
And chapter 6.
Okay. And since we're still discussing solutions and so forth, what about now amongst ourselves as Africans? We've seen African countries sign treaties year in, year out, but then how do we move that from just paper, just a signature and a treaty, to more collaboration amongst ourselves as African countries?
I think international cooperation, informal networks. How fast do we exchange information when an intelligence agency in Kenya tells Uganda that money has crossed over? Can you kindly stop it? I need this information. It's a question of expediting the communication between African countries.
Okay.
And as we speak about this, I must mention that we have informal networks, what we call the Asset Recovery Interagency Network of Eastern Africa, and we have for the Southern Africa, and Kenya is a member of both. And out of those informal networks, we have gained a lot. Because just as my senior Muthoni was explaining, when you go through the formal channel, which is a mutual legal assistance, it can take a year, depending on how much the other country is handling. But if you use the informal networks, first they guide. What do you need to do to stop this money the minute it reaches the other side? They guide you on their laws.
Okay.
And it's very quick for you to do a document and you send it formally.
Okay.
So international cooperation, communication is very key.
All right.
Yes.
Some recommendations. I know Transparency International has made so many of them, but you'll just have to repeat again.
Well, if you allow me, let me just be a little bit general and say that, and borrow from a conversation I had with someone visiting this country yesterday, that, you know, Africa is the future of the world.
Yeah.
This is where a lot of the investments are going to take place in the coming decades. It's where the opportunity for economic growth is going to be. And Kenya occupies a very prime place, almost in every respect, of the life of East Africa and Africa generally. We are basically a heavyweight, but we punch sometimes way below our weight. I think it's time for us to really rise to the occasion and provide the leadership we need to provide in matters of ethics and integrity. And I like the fact that the president has put a foot forward. I am also aware that within the framework of the African Union addressing public service, that we are one of actually the first pilot in addressing matters of integrity within the public service. And I think we can do it, and we need to do it. Okay. A score of 27, a mean out of a mean of 32 in Africa is not what we deserve. But it is not a place we've just landed out of the blues. It is our own acts of commission and omission that have landed us where we are. Okay. And the leadership we have, and when I talk about leadership, I'm not just talking about political leadership. We have leadership at very different levels. You know, we have in the social circles, you have the churches, you have the religious leaders, you have the judiciary, the head of the judiciary and the infrastructure around him, the head of, the National Assembly and the infrastructure around him, the Senate. So when the counties, when I talk of leadership, it's a lot more corporate. But I do not think that we will go far without a resolute leadership about all these things. And some of these are not easy things. They are very, very difficult. Okay. But they have to be done. And for the leaders who are listening to us today, they just have to know they are there, and they have to play their role to make sure that this ship turns to the right, to the true north, as it were, when it comes to matters of ethics and integrity.
All right. Muthoni, what more would you like to see so that your agency is supported more?
For me, I would like to see a more involved citizenry who are able to report to us where these assets are, especially the ones which are domiciled in Kenya. I would like to have them have more trust in law enforcement, where they can come and report without retaliation. As my colleague stated, it's very sad that we see all these assets everywhere and nobody's coming up to tell me, actually, the actual beneficial owner is Muthoni who owns this building. Yeah. It's not that guy who sits there, it's Muthoni who owns it. If we can have that, then we'll be able to trace it, and we will never refer to those whistleblowers. For us, it's very easy when we're tracing assets because we don't need them for the predicate offenses. So we encourage them to come and report to us. We never, ever reveal where we've gotten this information from.
Okay.
And the other thing I would like to see is, in terms of what you've asked about Africa, I would like to see a more cooperative Africa in terms of exchange of information with the FIUs, especially financial intelligence that is shared in real time, so that we have inter-Africa money laundering, illicit financial flows. If you look at the Becky report, it's there for us to read and see that what is happening in Africa. And I think it would help us if all of us realize that, as what Mr. Kimani was saying, Africa is the future. And if we don't take care of our financial system, if we don't fight corruption, and we keep on being in the, mentioned in the big corruption index everywhere, I think we will not do. Finally, I would like to see, if possible, an amendment to bring in the elected officers to be able to, we don't use the word stepping aside, to have them interdicted in some way. I don't know, because they are voted by the people. Maybe probably this will need a constitutional amendment, because they fall back to that constitutional provision that the Constitution provides for the mechanisms in which they can be removed from office. This will help us a lot, so that they don't go back to their offices and influence witnesses, and also take retaliatory measures against whistleblowers.
All right. Thank you so much for making time this morning. Muthoni Kimani, Director, Assets Recovery Agency. Asante sana. Samuel Kimeu, Executive Director, Transparency International. Judith Shamala, Senior Attorney, Civil Litigation and Asset Recovery at EACC. Asante sana. And Caroline Gaita, Executive Director, Mzalendo Trust. Thanks for having that conversation with us. Tomorrow marks the African Day, the African Anti-Corruption Day, towards a common African position on asset recovery. So this issue of asset recovery is still a continuation of that discussion that's taking place tomorrow. Let's see what you're saying on social media. 22422 SMS line, and Citizen TV Kenya, Trevor Mbija, ZZK. If you can bring them up. Agumba Steve says, corruption has become one of the qualities of being a Kenyan. Too bad our leaders give commands they cannot reinforce. We got to continue suffering.
All right.
All right.
That's on Twitter, still sticking there. Dave, you say, I support the war on graft by making all public to be inclusive in the fight. We as Inclusivity Code Organization intensify on that aspect. We wish to the show for super ideas.
Yes.
All right.
Prefer more ideas on that. Let's see if we still have more. Engineer Lazaro again. How do you expect Kenya to be ranked among countries like Rwanda, where no corruption case has successfully been prosecuted since independence? There was a report by EACC, I think they prosecuted 122 cases. Yeah, people who've been convicted, that's what the data shows.
Okay, on SMS, you don't say who you are. Corruption in this country, like it is in Nigeria, had reached a point of no return. It is done openly in employment, on the roads, in civil service, and the whistleblowers lack government protection.
All right, let's see another text coming through to our studios here, and it's Francis Mbaya from Athiriva. The problem we are facing as a country is not the bad laws, but the silence of the few good leaders. Then we cannot win the war on graft. All right.
Our last one on SMS 22422. You don't leave a name. The ADR way of dealing with corruption cases is not a bad idea, but how do we deter these same people from stealing from the public and being elected to any public office? The ACC should create a sort of a blacklist where the names of all the people found guilty of corruption are entered, and it should be available to the public.
Yeah, EACC will take that up.
Good idea.
Yeah, all their names somewhere within the CBD on a statue.
Actually, if you allow me, the EACC has the constitutional mandate to oversee the implementation of Chapter 6. That is not wishful thinking. In my view, it's a constitutional mandate that they cannot run away from.
How have they performed so far?
I think to their credit, they are the only agency I know that gave a list to the IBC in 2017, and there was no follow-up, but at least it was an indication that the EACC does recognize that it has a role. The only point I would say is that we should have taken it beyond that, because EACC oversees Chapter 6 and IBC determines who gets onto the ballot. The question of the integrity of officers rests finally with the ESCC, not the IEBC.
So they shouldn't be allowed to run for any seat.
Yeah, follow up, Shamala. Where's the follow up? You give the list, but you don't follow up.
The list was given.
And the timing of giving the list. I think it was done too close
to the elections.
Like 2 days to the elections.
I think the problem was not us giving the list too close. Again, it was the names that were submitted by IEBC for the people who had been confirmed that are running for elective position.
Right, so IEBC sends you a list, you look at it,
they send it late, we have to look
list.
at it, we have to engage the DCI as well, DPP, the courts, how many convictions do we have as against a certain person before you put their name in that list. So if the names come a bit late, then of course
to go back late.
To fall back. Interesting.
Again, institutional communication and gelling so that things work out perfect. All right, that's why we take a short break. When we come back, are we working out?
Willis Waburu is working out.
Okay.
He's the one who's doing the working
Relax,
out.
I didn't say you need to do it.
We'll be right back.